In this video, I cover parameters and arguments. In a nutshell, a parameter is a variable defined in a function's declaration that specifies what kind of input the function expects. A function can have 0, 1 to any number of parameters. Let's take a look at an example. Over here I have a function named output_mult, short for output multiplication, and it defines two parameters. The first parameter is named a of type int. The second parameter is named b of type a. That shows that this function expects two inputs, both of type int. The function also has a void return type, which I cover in another video, but it simply means that this function doesn't return a value. It simply expects two inputs and it performs some computation. Whenever a function executes, you can expect that all parameters are assigned a value. In this particular case, I can assume that a and b are assigned a value. So the first statement that I'm executing in this function is the multiplication of a times b. And I store the result in a new variable named product of type int. The second statement actually happens to be a function call as well to the function printf. This function call outputs the value of a, star, then the value of b, equal sign, and then the value of my local variable named product. Essentially, it outputs the equation of this multiplication, including the result. Now let's take a look how we can execute or call this function. Before I show how to call this function, let's clarify what an argument is. An argument is the actual value passed to a function when the function is called, and the argument matches the function parameter. Here's an example how I call a function. Note that when calling a function, I never state the return type. I simply start with the name. You can see printf, I just call printf. So for output_mult, I also output_mult, and then the arguments that I want to pass to it. In this case, the arguments are 3 and 5, matching the parameters of int and int. Int a and int b are the parameters, 3 and 5 are the arguments that are passed to the function. So when I'm executing this line of code in my program, what will happen is it'll perform the computation of 3 times 5, which is 15. 15 is stored as in product, and then it'll output 3 times 5 equal 15, exclamation mark. And then my program would continue with the following statements after this function call. Let's take a look at an example. Over here I have a short program with two functions. The main function that doesn't define any parameters, and a user-defined function named printRange that defines two parameters. The first parameter is named start of type int. The second parameter is named end of type int. That means when I call this function expects two integers that are passed to it. Now I add a short comment here, so if anybody sees my function and wants to know how it works in detail, I show that it prints a range of values from start to end, and both of these are inclusive. That means both start and the value end will also be outputted as part of the range. Now let's take a look at the actual statements of what this function does when it's called. First, I have a printf statement, which essentially is also a call to the printf function. This simply outputs the very first value of the range. Then I have a for loop. The for loop has a variable I, which is initialized to the value right after start by computing start plus 1. So assuming start is 1, I would be 2 because I do 1 plus 1, which is 2. So the very first value here would be 2. Then the condition is this loop continues as long as I is equal to or less than end. And after each iteration, I increment the value of I. In each iteration, I output a comma followed by the value of I. And finally, after the loop, when this condition is no longer satisfied, I output a line break. So basically what I'm doing, I'm outputting all the values between this range of start and end, and including end, and at the end I output a line break. Now taking a look at the main function, we can take a look how my own function is called. Simply by writing the name of the function print range and then passing values 1 and 10 to it. So when this function executes, I can see that 1 and 10 will be assigned to the parameters start being 1 and end being 10, and then this function executes. Let's run this program. So here I can see by calling 1 and 10, it outputs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then does a line break and the program ends. I could also update this. Let's say I want to output the values from 3 to 8, and I run my program again. Now it outputs 3 to 8. So this is nice if you have a program where multiple times you want to output some range. You simply create a function and you can use this function anywhere in your program. It's very clear to see in a single line what you're doing. I simply output the range from 3 to 8 without having to look at the individual statements. Now let's actually put a break statement here and here as well and run this again. Now when running this, the breakpoint hits, so the program stops right here. I click going into the function. So 3 and 8 are the arguments that are passed to the function, and when I hover over here, I can see start is 3 and end is 8. Now I output 3. I go to the next line. 3 plus 1 will be 4. So here you can see it's 4. 4 is outputted. I go next line. It's still 4, but it'll perform 4 plus plus, which will be 5. So going next iteration, I can see I is 5. Then it will be 6. It will be 7. And it will be 8. And here you can see it'll output 8. It'll go up one more time. Increment 8 to 9, and then this condition will no longer be satisfied. So we'll stop the loop, output the return carriage, complete the function and return to the main. If there would be additional statements here, it would continue the program. In this case, I just have a single statement of return 0. So with that, it'll end the program. I hope this gives you an idea of what parameters are, what arguments are, how they are different. And if you're curious, please check out my next. I hope this gives you an idea of what parameters are, what arguments are, and how they are different. Please check out my next video on return values. Thank you for watching.